Hello, Dinara.
Hi, James. You look very young today. I don't know why.
So, thank you very much. So I'm not sure. I think I just slept. So, or it's nice lighting. I don't know. So yeah, that's good. So excellent. Welcome back, everybody. And so now we're going to be starting with the, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start with the reading summary. We're going to be looking at a reading summary completion. So we're going to be having a look at that. With these, always look at the questions below. And specifically, you've got to complete the summary. And remember, you're not allowed more than 2 words from the passage for each answer. That's really important when you look at those facts.
Yes, and obviously, please be very careful when you with spelling, because wrong spelling, your answer will not be accepted.
Yes, of course. And so English is quite tricky for spelling, so do be careful with that. Absolutely. Okay, so so what we're going to do is we're going to get started. And this comes from 2010. That's very recent for their standards. So as in that's almost yesterday by their standards, by IELTS standards. But it is the 3rd edition, so it's probably, as in from the 1st edition as well, but they might have just updated it. So the instructions accompanying do-it-yourself products are regularly cited as a source of unnecessary expense or frustration. Few companies seem to test their instructions by having them followed by a first-time user. Often, essential information is omitted, steps in the construction process are taken for granted, and some degree of special knowledge is assumed. This is especially worrying in any fields where failure to follow correct procedures can be dangerous. Objections to material in plain English have come mainly from the legal profession. Lawyers point to the risk of ambiguity inherent in the use of everyday language for legal or official documents, and draw attention to the need for confidence in legal formulations, which can come only from using language that has been tested in courts over the course of centuries. The campaigners point out that there has been no sudden increase in litigation as a consequence of the increase in plain English materials. Similarly, professionals in several different fields have defended their use of technical and complex language as being the most precise means of expressing technical or complex ideas. This is undoubtedly true. Scientists, doctors, bankers, and others need their jargon in order to communicate with each other succinctly and unambiguously. But when it comes to addressing the non-specialist consumer, the campaigners argue different criteria must apply.
Yeah, very interesting topic. There are things I disagree with, and some words I do not know, as usual. James, what does
succinctly?
Yeah.
Short and to the point.
And ambiguously, unambiguously?
Completely clearly. So if something's ambiguous, is the opposite. So ambiguous means you're not entirely sure what the meaning is, what the sense of it is.
So, for example, instead of saying I do not understand, I can say this is ambiguous.
Yeah, you could say this is so instead of saying I do not understand, you could say this is ambiguous. Absolutely, yeah.
And will I sound too posh? Okay.
No, not really. So I mean, it's a little bit formal, but but it is the best word for this sense,
Oh, I see.
You often get that. That often does happen where you've got a best word for something. That's how it is.
And what do you think about instructions? Do you find them difficult in general yourself?
The most common instructions that I follow tend to be for food. But whenever it comes to anything in terms of electronics or setting something up or building something, I find them quite complicated and confusing. So there's this wonderful website actually, which is called Honest Slogans. It's actually a Tumblr that I think hasn't been updated in 10 years or 12 years. But it's got a brilliant, but basically what they have is they have, you know, Pepsi, or they have, you know, whatever other brands like, you know, so North Face, or, you know, as in Burger King, lots of different brands they have there. And what they actually put on the one for IKEA for their honest slogan, if they were being honest, we throw in extra parts just to mess with you. And it's so true as well. And, you know, setting up IKEA furniture is one of the, you know, it's one of those things that I hate the most. I really hate setting up flat pack furniture. It's really annoying. And when it comes to things like the sofa, I just will ask them to do it, you know. So I just pay a little bit extra to get them to do it because I don't want to do it myself. If it's a table or something, I'll usually do it, but it is very annoying. Absolutely. So it's quite complicated. How do you feel about them?
About IKEA?
Well, just generally instructions, but yeah.
I love them. I love them. That's how I check myself, how my brain works, and train it, let's say.
Well, I do like the stuff that they have, and comparatively, I think the instructions are a little bit easier to follow because they usually have pictures. But when it's the instructions that I find the most annoying are whenever there's a technical problem with, say, your computer or with a smart TV or something like that, and then you read the different solutions, and they all seem ridiculously long-winded or complicated. So I recently had a problem with my smart TV where it wasn't connecting to the internet. I had a look at the instructions and they were all incredibly complicated. So what I just did is I waited a few days, and then I saw that the problem was a little bit different, and then I just typed in the Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi password, and it was fine. You know, so I'm glad I didn't put myself through that. That would have been awful.
Yeah. For electronics, I usually look for videos on YouTube.
Yes.
Cool. And I know that IKEA, why it has become so popular and famous for its simplified instructions. In the past, in time of our parents, instructions, they were even worse, people say, more difficult.
Yes, I can imagine that. Absolutely.
Okay, guys, why I asked about it because recently I've been listening to lectures in anthropology, and anthropologists, they say that easier our life is, more stupid we become as civilization, humans.
Yes.
And smartest people, they live in countries, in super poor countries with lots of problems. They are the smartest nowadays.
Well, I think it's possible, but I think that you just get you get different challenges and different solutions, basically. So, as in to life, you know. Whereas, you know, the important stuff to remember was things like how to make a fire, and nowadays it's how to make an Excel file. You know, so in the skills you have change. Yeah, so the skills you have change, exactly.
True, but in their case, what they mean smart in their way, that they will survive better, obviously, than we people who live in big cities.
Oh, certainly, because the thing is that we're completely hopeless in big cities. So, as in, you know, and I think that the pandemic really showed that to everybody, because the pandemic, suddenly all of the Instagram influencers and you know, the celebrities and everything else, they just became really pointless. And suddenly people working at the supermarket were really important. Teachers, doctors, nurses, so the lorry drivers, the bin men, the delivery drivers. So suddenly they became much, much more important, because they're the people that you need, the farmers as well, because they're the people you need to survive. So whereas all the other so many of the private sector jobs, they just make money. That's literally all they do. They don't do anything fabulously beneficial to anybody. So I think the pandemic really showed that, as in you don't survive without other people, But, when it comes to jargon specifically, though, I understand why legal jargon is the way that it is. I understand why medical jargon is the way it is. But a lot of business English, I just think, I do realize it's a form of, it's a massive contributor to new English words. Business English, it's a huge portion of the new words come from business English. But I think a lot of it is very pretentious. So as in, so one of the ones that really used to get on my nerve, I remember there was one thing my mum used to say all the time that I thought was very funny. So I disagree with her now, but I do think that word is overused, because nowadays client is somebody who buys a service, and a customer is someone who buys a product. But I remember she used to say to me, what was it? Oh, it was just brilliant. Only prostitutes and lawyers have clients. So, everybody else has customers. And so I did feel a bit funny about the overuse of the word client, but that was the case like 50 years ago or so, basically. Those were the two career choices, career paths that had clients, so everybody else had and therapists and other things like that. But now the word client is very common for buying a service instead of buying a product.
Interesting. We also had this saying that only prostitutes. I don't remember about lawyers, but when I said the word client in Russian, people say only prostitutes have clients. I found it very weird.
Yes, I can imagine. But the one that used to really get on my nerves massively was when we used to get these emails that would just say, "Can you please action this?" Because action being used as a verb, that used to really get on my nerves. Because I used to just think, why not just say do?
Or act.
Take care of this, as in look into this. Can you sort this out? There are so many short, snappy ways of saying that you use this ridiculous action. Please action this. So it just sounds stupid, so that sort of language. And then you've got so many, but there are so many other terms that are business that we just use all the time, like benchmark and targets and so many other business terms that we use all the time. But action as a verb, that used to really do my head in. I hated that. I hated that word so much. Action.
And I hate how Americans destroy English.
Well, yeah, they can come out with some strange ones. To be honest with you, the one the one personally that has got on my nerves more than anything else is because I worked in Germany for international companies before. Every single time they would get a bunch of English native speakers, and they wouldn't check to see which language they'd set it, which version of English they'd set it to. And the problem with the English US, it was a bit annoying with the spelling. So then, telling us that writing with a U, something with a U was wrong, for example. That was a bit annoying, but the one that was incredibly irritating was the time date format.
PM, AM?
No. The date format, I mean, just not the time date for it was the PM AM is fine. We use that as well. But the worst one was the date, because they write the date in a really weird way. So as in, so they write the date as month, then day, then year. And it's really confusing, because almost everybody else writes day, month, year, smallest to largest. And that used to get very confusing, especially when it was in the lower numbers, because, for example, it's the 12th of September today. So this in normal, in the normal way is the 12th of, say, it's 12/9/2022. But but in the American format, it would be 9/12/2022. And that looks like the 9th of December. So that used to confuse me all the time. So I that was the one that really got on my nerves. I was just like, no, stop it. Oh, and Z, I can't stand Z. So if I hear the last letter of the alphabet referred to as Z, then I will correct immediately. And soccer, I hate that word as well. So as in, and the pronunciation of leisure is the other one. But some of them, but some of their terms are quite sweet though, as in, so that they have a lot of good terms as well. And it's a very, the languages have just, the versions of the language have just diverged a bit, basically. So, so American English has had its own innovations, British English has had its own innovations, because the Americans like to think it's the older form of the language, but it's not quite true, because they've had their own innovations in some areas. Like a very clear example of that is better, for example. So they say better, and it's the sort of d sound. That is a change that's happened in the last 100 years or 200 years, I think. But keeping the R sound is older. That's true.
Really?
Yeah, that is a bit older. Used to be more common in many parts of the UK, but not all parts. So that's why you get some parts of the US where they don't pronounce the R, like especially in the Northeast and a few areas of the South, they don't pronounce the R there.
Very interesting.
But in terms of the phonology, the pronunciation, so the reason why they do A instead of R for some words is because it comes, but they still say and not O. So it's interesting. So the reason for that is that because it comes from a period where in the south of England they had moved from the U to the the U to the and then so as in, but they hadn't yet developed the R sound. Whereas in the north of England and the centre of England, the standard, and because it's older pronunciation, the standard that there is no sound. It's all up. So it's up, so it's up, pub, etc. It's not.
Not. Yeah, I've heard, of course. Up, pub. Interesting.
Yeah. So that sound, that phoneme just doesn't exist in the north of it. So the interesting one, though, with American English is it comes in that period before the R developed in many words like last or bath or whatever, So but it was after the split, the put split. So that's so in terms of the oldest dialect, the one that's supposed to be the oldest, it would be one of the regional dialects. It wouldn't be one of the standards. So it would be one of the dialects. And probably, I think a contender is in the centre of England. There's one called Black Country, which is very, very old. So it's just to the northwest of Birmingham. So that's supposedly one of the closer ones to Old English.
Cool.
So, but yeah, but the thing is that so much is made of the actual differences between the two standards, but the two standards are not that different. As in, the differences between the dialect, between regional dialects and accents is much greater than the difference between the two standards. Because if you listen to, for example, a Brummie accent or a West Country accent, or or a Bostonian accent for that matter, or you hear much more there. It's quite a bit stronger, or in parts of the South, it's much of the US. It's much bigger difference between, say, as in a Bostonian accent or some of the accents in the South of the US and what's called General American than there is between General American and British English. And it's the same with, received pronunciation and, as in Brummie or Geordie or Cockney or, or Scouse. Those dialects are more, are further, so are more different from the standard, from so-called standard, which is RP, received pronunciation, than RP is to General American.
So General American and British English, they are more similar than British English, common Queen's British English, let's say, and Cockney.
Well, yeah, I would say so, because Cockney, there are bigger differences with the vowels and the diphthongs and things like that, and so I would say yes, that they are more so in some respects. I mean, you can still hear that Cockney is a recognisably English accent; it's a recognisably British accent, but there's more variation with the dialects than there is with the standards, basically. And you can go into large areas, you don't even hear any differences in many different areas of vocabulary. And then just occasionally you'll get one particular topic like cars, for example, and almost everything is different. So the only thing that's the same is the word for the car. Almost. Oh, well, the car, a few other things like brakes, wheels, so brakes, wheels, seat belts, car seats, dashboard, a number of words are the same, but many of the words, many of the other words are totally different. So bonnet, hood, for example. So bonnet is the British word, hood is the American. Boot, trunk. So boot, British, trunk, American. Windscreen, the UK, windshield, the US, as in gas pedal versus accelerator. So as in the clutch is the same, but they don't know how to drive with manual cars anyway, so they rarely use them. And then you've got, well, that was a joke, of course, but some of them do, but the automatics are more popular there. And then you've got so many of the words for related, and then there's petrol. Obviously, the fuel for it is different. So petrol UK, gasoline US. So that's an interesting one, is that you see an invention like the car that obviously comes in the late 19th century, and it's totally different. So so much of the vocabulary is totally different. But then you can read through 10 pages of a text of a book, and you might have seen 2 words that were different, or obviously some spelling differences, but you might only have seen a couple words that were different.
And guys, why it's very important, obviously, because in audios, in listening part, you will hear not only British English, you hear American English also. So you need to be able to understand both pronunciations. Plus, obviously, you will hear in audios different kinds of British English, and so you need to really prepare yourself for those things. Train yourself, let's say, not prepare, train.
And also, it's possible you might even hear other English-speaking countries, so like South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, these have very distinct accents. So a variety of accents in some cases. Canada is a little bit different as well. So just be prepared for that. There's a big variety in the way English is spoken, and that's just for the native speakers. So let's quickly do these answers then. So the first answer: consumers often complain that they experience a feeling of frustration when trying to put together do-it-yourself products, which have not been tested by companies. So this is frustration because it's the second line, a source of unnecessary expense or frustration. Few companies seem to test their instructions by having them followed by a first-time user. So we know the number 2 is a first-time user. So that makes sense. So the whole sentence: consumers often complain that they experience a feeling of frustration when trying to put together do-it-yourself products which have not been tested by companies on a first-time user.
So guys, first-time user is 2 words.
Yeah, exactly. So first time with a hyphen in between the 2, and then user as the second. Because hyphenated words count as a single word. So in situations where not keeping to the correct procedures could affect safety issues, it is especially important that, and I would imagine it's essential, so as in, so often essential information is omitted. So this one is especially important that essential information is not left out. Essential. And no assumptions are made about a stage being self-evident or the consumer having a certain amount of knowledge, special knowledge. So because it says here, and some degree of special knowledge is assumed. Lawyers, however, have raised objections to the use of plain English. They feel that it would result in ambiguity in documents and cause people to lose faith in, and then let's have a look here. So point to the risk here, and draw attention to the need for confidence in legal formulations. So lose faith. Confidence is another way of saying faith in legal formulations. As it would mean, exactly. So it would mean departing from language that has been used in the courts for a very long time.
Okay, guys, I think this type of tasks, they check how attentive you are, obviously. They train you to be attentive, more attentive. While reading, and they want to see how well you can recognize synonyms. And it teaches you to say the same things with different words and to be more clear in your speech. Very interesting. So I really love preparing for IELTS and this type of exams, because they just not check our language, they also develop us. We read and listen to a lot of interesting information and so become more knowledgeable and develop our analytical way of thinking. James, thank you. See you in our next episodes.
Yes, exactly. And I'll see you next time. So you take care.
Bye guys.